victims, but federal prosecutors have not brought hate crime charges against any African Americans. The question now is this racial hypocrisy? Joining us now, child psychologist Dr. Chuck Williams, who's been monitoring these so-called knockout cases. And out of Houston, Texas, is attorney and Arise News contributor Horace Cooper. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today. And Horace, let me start with you. In the latest Texas case involving Conrad Barrett, who'd been charged with a hate crime, do you see this as a double standard?
Well, it certainly is a double standard. The administration seems to be hyper inconsistent. You can look all over their website and not see any reference to the knockout game up until this point. There have been a number of troubling instances where it appears that the Justice Department is more interested in targeting whites with these kinds of bias laws than applying them across the board to all Americans who violate them.
All right, Horace, thank you for that. Now, we also have Dr. Chuck Williams on the phone with us. And Chuck, you know, why does this even happen? I mean, can we talk a little bit about what the phenomenon is that's pushing this knockout game business forward?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on to talk about this issue. I have to start by saying I disagree with my colleague. I don't think that there's been a bias, because that would be unconstitutional and the Supreme Court would step in, or at a minimum, a Republican U.S. House of Representatives would have said something about it a long time ago, and they would not have allowed it to continue. I think we have to be very clear that when it comes to being able to say that something was racially motivated, the bar is really high. Just because you have two people on either side of the racial divide doesn't mean that an attack is racially motivated. But beyond that, it's just inappropriate youth aggression that is magnified and exaggerated on social media. And beyond that, there's now an appetite for it because young people can go to these sites like Twitter, like Instagram, or YouTube, and they can see these clips of, their peers engaging in this inappropriate aggression. And in a certain way, because of the hits and the clicks and the number of views, it is socially reinforced, almost making it within certain pockets of youth culture a norm. And that's part of the challenge.
Sure, social media is certainly changing the way things are going there. Do you want to respond, Horace Cooper?
Yeah, I think the point is well made that there are serious constitutional questions that arise when it appears that these prosecutions aren't occurring based on merit, but instead by targeting people. It will lead to potentially a challenge that could have the hate law struck down entirely. But you've got a Brooklyn City Council member asking for the Justice Department to come in and investigate the number of knockout attacks involving Orthodox Jews. You have a case going on right now in Syracuse, New York, in which the Justice Department hasn't announced that they're monitoring, they're looking at the outcome. And in the case in Texas, if Texas were allowed to go forward with this case, the penalty would be 25 years to life. This maximum penalty, which would, with the federal intervention, is only a 10-year sentence. I am very, very curious why the Justice Department hasn't made any effort to put out any statement about the concerns about the knockout game, and why there have been so many who have tried to minimize its existence.
Who just recently wrote an opinion piece that I read, and it's out there, where he says that those kinds of crimes should not be tolerated. The community should stand up against it, and if it is motivated by anti-Semitism, then it should be prosecuted as such.
All right, well, gentlemen, what about something else? I mean, this latest case, they said that perhaps, he has bipolar disorder. That is what the, attorney is arguing for the gentleman here, 27-year-old Conrad Barrett of Katy, Texas. But the victim has, 70-something years old, 2 jaw fractures, and this guy here, Mr. Barrett, apparently used the N-word in previous videos, and he said that he hadn't fully experienced the blessing of evolution for a certain race. I mean, doesn't that sort of set a precedent in a way that, we need to pay attention to?
Well, let me be very clear and say, as a mental health professional, having that diagnosis of bipolar disorder is no reason for his inappropriate and heinous act. The overwhelming majority, 99.44% of people who have that disorder are not going to behave in that way. So I don't even know why people mention that. I mean, that is a disorder where there's mania and there's depression, but not.
Well, it's just because it's what his attorney is mentioning.
Yeah,
that.
I want to be very clear.
I'm only
using a lot of those kinds of bogus mental health excuses, from affluenza to this. I mean, we have to be very clear not to label people who have mental health diagnoses as being violent, because most of them are not. So, but beyond that, I think what's important, and I think Horace would agree with me, is that we hold people accountable who do these things, regardless of race,
Absolutely.
creed, gender, sexuality, or political affiliation. If you do something like this, you need to be held accountable and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Chuck Williams, I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave it there, and want to say thank you to Horace Cooper as well for joining us. The debate continues. Hopefully there will not continue to be victims of these knockout crimes. All right.